There is a stone in southern England that weighs 6 tons. It has been lying in the same field for 5,000 years. Geologists spent decades assuming they knew roughly where it came from. Then, in 2024, a team ran a geochemical analysis and traced the rock to northeastern Scotland, at least 750 kilometers away. Every previous theory about its origin had been wrong. That stone is not unique. All over the world, there are structures that seem to appear earlier than our usual models would predict. Walls fitted without mortar to tolerances a modern mason would struggle to match. Cities built without kings, writing, or warfare. Chambers tuned to specific acoustic frequencies. Monuments aligned to astronomical events that took generations of observation to predict. The explanation is more interesting than aliens or lost empires. It's that ancient people were far more organized, observant, and technically capable than we usually give them credit for, and that we still haven't fully worked out what they were doing. 20 sites, starting with the ones that are strange and building toward the ones that genuinely change how we think about what early humans were capable of. Number 20. The Plain of Jars, Laos. On a mountain plateau in central Laos, scattered across the hillsides, are hundreds of enormous stone vessels. Some are 3 meters tall, some weigh 20 tons. Archaeologists call the region the Plain of Jars. The culture that made them has no name we know. It's not one site, it's at least 120 sites across the Yanghuang Plateau, containing over 2,100 individual jars, the largest collection of megalithic stone vessels anywhere on Earth, and the least studied for a specific reason. Laos remains one of the most heavily bombed countries on Earth, and unexploded ordnance from the Vietnam War era still limits archaeological access across large parts of Shankwang province. Less than 10% of the jar sites have been cleared. The others are still off-limits. Dating work published in PLOS One in 2021 suggested the jars may have been placed there during the late 2nd millennium BC, pushing the timeline back over 1,000 years from earlier estimates. The people who made them left no identifiable settlements, no writing, no burial complexes that could be securely linked to the jar-making period. Mortuary activity around the jars has been documented, but most of the jars themselves are empty. The sandstone was quarried roughly 8 kilometers from Site 1 and transported across mountainous terrain without wheels. How exactly is not known. Somewhere under those hillsides is probably the answer. We just can't reach it yet. The most understudied ancient mystery on Earth isn't in Egypt, it's in a minefield. Number 19. Nabta Playa, Egypt. About 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel, in the middle of the Saharan desert, there's a stone circle that predates Stonehenge by roughly 1,000 years. It was built by nomadic cattle herders, people with no fixed settlements, no agriculture, and no writing. Yet they arrange stones in a configuration that appears to track the summer solstice. The one day of the year when rains arrive to fill the lake they seasonally camped beside. 30 additional megalithic structures ring the area. In 1998, archaeoastronomers J. McKim Malville and Fred Wendorf published an analysis in Nature, claiming 2 stone gates in the circle frame the summer solstice sunrise with significant precision. Later, they acknowledged the spacing was wider than a precision instrument would require. Other researchers then proposed sight lines aligning to Orion's belt, Sirius, Arcturus, and Alpha Centauri at various dates in the 5th millennium BC. Counter studies pointed out that some of those proposed dates predate construction at the site by over 1,000 years. The debate has not been resolved. It's also been made harder by the fact that the original stones were relocated to the Aswan Nubia Museum. Resurveying the original configuration is now nearly impossible. What's not in dispute is that nomadic cattle herders, 7,000 years ago, in the middle of what is now one of the driest places on Earth, chose this specific spot and arranged stones in a way that at minimum reflects careful observation of the sky. 7,000 years ago, nomadic herders built something in the Saharan desert that we still can't fully explain. Then we moved the stones to a museum and made it harder to study. Number 18. The Olmec Colossal Heads, Mexico. 17 stone heads, each one carved from a single basalt boulder, each one showing a distinct face, individual portraiture at a scale and realism that had no parallel in early Mesoamerica. The largest weighs around 40 tons, the smallest around 6. Every boulder was transported from the Sierra de los Tuxtlas volcano complex, 80 to 150 kilometers away, across rivers, swamps, and jungle, without wheels, draft animals, or metal tools. Geochemical sourcing has confirmed the volcanic origin. The transport method has not been demonstrated. The heads date to between 1200 and 400 BC, representing rulers of the Olmec, the earliest major civilization in Mesoamerica. Each face is individualized, different features, different headgear, different insignia. These are specific people. We don't know their names. Archaeologist Ann Cypher's ongoing work at San Lorenzo has shown that some heads were actually recarved from earlier, larger throne monuments, which means the transport problem is compounded. Some of these stones were moved once, carved into thrones, then recarved into heads. Each recarving erased evidence of the previous form. Around 900 BC, the heads at San Lorenzo were deliberately mutilated and buried. Whether that was a political revolution, a ritual decommissioning cycle, or something else is still debated. They moved 40-ton boulders through a swamp, carved 17 individual portraits, and then smashed several of them on purpose. The transport method, the names on the faces, and the reason for the destruction are all still open questions. Number 17. Great Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe. In the late 19th century, colonial writers began publishing claims that Great Zimbabwe, a massive stone city in southern Africa, had been built by Phoenicians or Arabs or the court of the Queen of Sheba. Anybody except local African communities. This wasn't just casual racism in academic dress. It was an active, organized effort. Archaeologists who concluded that the Shona people had built the city were pressured, sidelined, and in some cases professionally destroyed. Gertrude Caton Thompson demonstrated indigenous origin definitively in 1929 using systematic stratigraphic excavation. The colonial Rhodesian government continued to resist the conclusion into the 1970s. Great Zimbabwe was founded around 900 AD and reached its peak between 1226 and 1450. Its great enclosure has walls 11 meters high, roughly 1 million dry-laid granite blocks, no mortar, and an outer circuit nearly 250 meters around. At its height, approximately 10,000 people lived here. The kingdom controlled the gold trade across the Zimbabwe plateau and traded for Chinese celadon, Persian glass, and Arab coinage found in the ruins. Then it was abandoned, probably a combination of gold route shifts, drought, and soil exhaustion. But there's no definitive answer, partly because less than 2% of the site has ever been properly excavated. The early colonial digs were conducted by people actively trying to disprove the site's African origins. The damage to the stratigraphic record is not recoverable. The genuine mystery isn't who built it, it's how much we destroyed trying to pretend they didn't. Number 16. Caral, Peru. The oldest city in the Americas was already 5,000 years old when the Roman Empire was founded. Caral in Peru's Supe Valley is contemporary with Old Kingdom Egypt. Its pyramid mare measures roughly 150 meters by 110 meters at the base and rises 28 meters. It is the capital of the Norte Chico civilization, the earliest known complex society in the Western Hemisphere, spread across 18 urban settlements in the Supe, Huaura, and Fortaleza valleys. What makes Caral specifically unusual is the combination of things it doesn't have. Caral itself is pre-ceramic, no fired pottery at the main site during its peak period. Excavations have found no weapons and no defensive walls. The monumental architecture, 6 large ceremonial mounds, sunken circular plazas, residential complexes, was built and used without the militarism that nearly every other early civilization shows in its archaeological record. The economic base appears to have been a coastal inland exchange network. Fishing communities providing anchovies and sardines, inland sites providing cotton for nets, all tied together by a distributive system that left almost no evidence of elite accumulation. No ruler portraits, no war monuments, no mass graves indicating conquest. In 2005, archaeologist Ruth Shady announced the discovery of a proto-quipu at Caral, a knotted cord recording device dating to approximately 4,600 years ago, pushing the history of information storage in the Americas back by 3,500 years. Whether it encodes language or functions as a tally system is still debated. The oldest city in the Western Hemisphere apparently ran a 5,000-year-old civilization without clear evidence of warfare, conquest art, or a ruling class we can identify. Every model of how cities begin assumes those things. Number 15. Newgrange, Ireland. 5,200 years ago in Ireland's Boyne Valley, people built a passage tomb so precisely calibrated to the winter solstice that once a year, at dawn on the shortest days of the year, a narrow beam of light travels exactly 19 meters down the stone corridor and illuminates the central chamber for approximately 17 minutes. They didn't get lucky with the orientation. They engineered a separate structure, a roof box above the entrance, a feature unique to Newgrange, specifically to emit light at the correct angle. The geometry has been modeled by astronomer Tom Ray and Frank Prendergast, who calculated only a 1 in 13 probability of the alignment occurring by chance. The 200,000-ton mound contains a cruciform chamber with corbelled vaulting that has remained waterproof for over 5,000 years without maintenance. The builders had no metal tools, no writing, and no wheel. They had, apparently, a working understanding of solar geometry, accurate enough to engineer a calibrated light instrument into a burial monument. In 2020, ancient DNA extracted from remains in the central chamber identified one individual as the offspring of a first-degree incestuous union, a sibling pair or a parent and child. The researchers suggested this indicated a dynastic elite at Newgrange, and the finding generated significant coverage. In 2025, a study in antiquity challenged the social inference. The authors showed that the original burial position of the key individual is uncertain. The genetic clustering across Irish passage tombs is looser than initially presented, and tight pedigrees also appear in smaller, earlier tombs, not just in monuments of obvious prestige. The incest finding is real. The elite dynasty interpretation is contested. They built a working solar instrument into a tomb 5,000 years before the telescope. The DNA finding is real. What it means about who was in charge is still being argued. Number 14. The Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, Malta. Between 3,600 and 2,500 BC, someone spent what must have been generations carving a 3-level, underground complex out of soft Maltese limestone using chert, flint, and bone tools, no metal. The result is a 500 square meter structure with corbelled ceilings, ochre-painted surfaces, and architectural details that deliberately echo the above-ground temples built by the same culture at the same time. Approximately 7,000 individuals were interred across the Hypogeum's period of use. The site is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the best preserved prehistoric underground structures on Earth. The oracle chamber, a small niche carved into the wall, produces an unusual acoustic effect. Sound at a frequency of around 70 Hz resonates strongly, filling the chamber. Researchers have noted similar low-frequency resonance peaks in other Neolithic stone chambers across Britain and Ireland, including at Newgrange. Whether the builders designed for this effect, discovered it during construction, and incorporated it into ritual use, or whether the resonance is incidental to the chamber's geometry, hasn't been established. The harder mystery is the culture itself. The Maltese temple culture appeared around 3,800 BC and vanished completely around 2,500 BC. No signs of invasion or conquest. No obvious natural disaster in the record. The islands appear to have been essentially abandoned for several centuries before new settlers arrived. The reason for the collapse has never been satisfactorily explained. They carved a resonant underground chamber, filled it with 7,000 bodies, and kept the culture running for over 1,000 years. Then the entire civilization stopped, and nobody knows why. Number 13. The Carnac Stones, France. If you asked most people to picture a prehistoric stone monument, they'd probably imagine a circle. The Carnac alignments in southern Brittany are rows, more than 3,000 menhirs, arranged in long, curvilinear lines, stretching across 10 kilometers of Breton countryside. The largest individual stone, the Grand Menhir Brisé at Locmariaquer, weighs somewhere between 280 and 330 tons. It was erected around 4700 BC. It later toppled and broke into 4 pieces. In 2025, Bettina Schultz-Poulsen published a Bayesian radiocarbon analysis, placing the main alignments at between 4600 and 4300 BC, roughly 1500 years older than Stonehenge, and among the oldest large-scale monumental landscapes in Europe. The question of why the stones are in rows has never been answered. Alexander Thom's 1970s claim that the alignments encode precise astronomical calculations using a standard megalithic yard unit of measurement has been statistically rejected. UNESCO's dossier for the Carnac nomination frames the site as a funerary and cosmological landscape, which explains the burial mounds and dolmens scattered among the alignments, but not why 3,000 stones are standing in lines rather than any other configuration. The Grand Menhir Brisé was quarried several kilometers away and erected by a society we classify as early farming communities. No physical evidence of the transport method survives. Someone spent generations hauling 300-ton stones across Brittany and standing them in very long rows. The classic astronomical explanations have been tested, and none have settled the question. Number 12. The Nazca Lines, Peru. The Nazca geoglyphs were made by scraping away the dark surface layer of the Peruvian desert to expose lighter soil underneath. The figures, hummingbirds, spiders, condors, orcas, humanoid forms, are visible as recognizable shapes only from the air. They were known locally, but they were not systematically documented by outside researchers until the 1920s and 30s. For decades, the purpose of the lines was the dominant question. Maria Reicher's astronomical calendar theory was statistically rejected by Anthony Avini and Gerald Hawkins in the 1980s. Johann Reinhardt's water cult model fits some of the linear features, but not the animals. The lines didn't consistently point toward water, or solstice positions, or anything else with enough regularity to close the debate. In September 2024, archaeologist Masato Sakai and a team from IBM Research published a paper in PNAS that shifted the picture. They trained an AI model on 430 known geoglyphs and applied it to aerial imagery of the region. The system flagged 47,410 candidate locations. 6 months of ground truthing confirmed 303 new figurative geoglyphs, nearly doubling the known total at 20 times the speed of human survey. The spatial pattern that emerged from the expanded dataset: larger line-type animal figures cluster within 34 meters of ceremonial pathways leading to the pilgrimage center at Kawachi. Smaller relief-type human and body part figures cluster within 43 meters of everyday foot trails. 2 different types of figures, 2 different audiences, 2 different purposes. In a landscape we'd been studying for nearly a century. We thought we understood the Nazca Lines. Then an AI found 300 more of them and changed what they mean. Number 11. The Cucuteni-Trypillia, megasites, Ukraine and Moldova. Between 4100 and 3000 BC, a culture spread across the forest steppe of what is now Ukraine and Moldova built settlements containing more than 1,000 houses each. Nebelivka covers 238 hectares and held an estimated 1,445 structures. Talianki, one of the largest sites, may have been even bigger. These are Chalcolithic megasites, enormous late Copper Age settlements. Whether they qualify as true cities in the urban sense is actively debated among archaeologists. What isn't disputed is the scale. They predate Mesopotamian Uruk and represent population concentrations that don't appear anywhere else in the world at that time. What makes them genuinely strange is the absence of the things cities are supposed to have. No palaces, no elite burials, no obvious military hierarchy, no ruler iconography. The houses are arranged in concentric rings with consistent spacing. Durham archaeologists John Chapman and Biserka Gajdarska identified what they call the modest pollen paradox. Local pollen cores show surprisingly light human impact on the surrounding landscape, inconsistent with thousands of people living permanently in one place. Some researchers now argue the megasites were seasonal assembly points rather than year-round settlements. Every 60 to 80 years, roughly one human generation, the entire settlement was burned. Experimental archaeology confirms these fires were deliberately fuel-loaded, hot enough to vitrify clay walls. This happened repeatedly, intentionally. The entire culture vanished around 3000 BC after roughly 750 years of megasite occupation. Russian invasion has frozen fieldwork since 2022. The largest prehistoric settlements on Earth had no rulers, no military, and a tradition of burning everything down every generation. We've barely started studying them, and now we can't. Number 10. Mohenjo-daro and the Indus script, Pakistan. The mature Harappan civilization at its peak between 2600 and 1900 BC covered an area larger than contemporary Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Roughly 1 million people across 1,000 settlements, connected by standardized weights, the same unit of measurement at sites separated by hundreds of kilometers, and fired brick with identical proportions used from the Himalayas to the Arabian Sea, and we cannot read a single word they wrote. The Indus script appears on roughly 4,000 inscribed objects, seals, tablets, pottery, with a sign inventory somewhere between 386 and 694 symbols, depending on how you count them. Most inscriptions are only 5 signs long. The script has never been deciphered. Asko Parpola has spent decades arguing it encodes an early form of Dravidian. Farmer, Sproat and Witzel argued in 2004 that it may not encode spoken language in the same way later scripts do at all, that it's a non-linguistic sign system. Rao and colleagues countered in a 2009 science paper that the conditional entropy patterns across the symbols are statistically consistent with linguistic structure. The argument is ongoing. What the physical record shows is a civilization of unprecedented scale, with no royal tombs, no palaces, no war art, no propaganda architecture. In every other Bronze Age civilization we know, power leaves traces, weapons in elite graves, ruler portraits on temple walls, conquest monuments. The Indus Valley has none of that. A civilization of 1 million people, organized apparently without anyone visibly in charge. In February 2025, Tamil Nadu's chief minister announced a $1 million prize for verified decipherment. The prize is unclaimed. A civilization of 1 million people wrote things down constantly. We can't read any of it. The prize for figuring it out has been sitting there since 2025. Number 9. The Majorville Medicine Wheel, Alberta, Canada. On a low ridge in the Alberta grasslands, about 40 kilometers southeast of Bassano, there is a ceremonial structure that most Canadians have never heard of. The Majorville Medicine Wheel consists of a central stone cairn roughly 9 meters in diameter, containing an estimated 50,000 kilograms of rock, with 28 stone lines radiating outward to a surrounding outer ring over 26 meters across. From above, the design is immediately recognizable, a large-scale geometric monument with the same basic spoke and hub form found at medicine wheels across the northern plains. Archaeologist John Brumley's analysis dated the central cairn to at least 4,500 years ago, contemporary with Stonehenge's main building phase, and making it one of the oldest ceremonial structures in North America. Surrounding spokes and sections of the outer rim are likely younger, added and maintained across multiple millennia by different indigenous peoples of the plains. The site appears to have been a living ceremonial location for thousands of years, not a single construction event. Archaeoastronomy researchers have noted that several of the radii point toward solstice and equinox, sunrise and sunset positions, and toward heliacal risings of Aldebaran, Rigel, and Sirius, stars significant in many planes' calendrical traditions. The 28 spokes also correspond to the length of the lunar cycle. These alignments are real, though their intentionality is debated among specialists. What isn't debated is the scale of the effort. 50,000 kilograms of rock, assembled over generations on an exposed prairie ridge. The Blackfoot Confederacy and neighboring nations have maintained the site's sacred status across all the time since. Canada's oldest ceremonial monument has been on the Alberta Plains for 4,500 years. Built across generations, still considered sacred, barely known outside the province. Number 8. Baalbek, Lebanon. The Romans were extraordinary engineers. They moved enormous weights routinely. The column drums of the Pantheon in Rome weigh approximately 60 tons each and were transported from Egyptian quarries. Roman construction records and engineering manuals have survived. We understand their methods reasonably well. At Baalbek in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, the platform supporting the Temple of Jupiter contains 3 stones called the Trilithum. Each one is roughly 19 meters long by 4 meters tall by 4 meters wide. Each one weighs between 750 and 800 tons. In the quarry below the site, still partly attached to bedrock, is a stone documented by the German Archaeological Institute in 2014. At approximately 1,650 tons, it is the largest carved stone monolith ever recorded. It was never moved. The mainstream engineering model for moving the trilithum blocks involves roughly 800 workers operating capstans on a purpose-built ramp. The problem is that no physical trace of such a ramp has been found. No capstan emplacements, no operational inscriptions, no construction records from the site. A minority view, argued by archaeologists Andreas Kropp and Daniel Lohmann, holds that the trilithon course may predate the Roman superstructure, with architectural parallels to Herod's Temple Mount. If true, those blocks were moved by people working before the height of Roman engineering capacity. That argument has not been settled. The blocks were moved. Somebody did it. The physical evidence for how has not survived, and no scaled experimental demonstration has been completed. The largest carved stone on Earth is still in its quarry. The ones that made it to the wall weigh 800 tons. We have a theory for how they got there and no physical evidence to support it. Number 7. Nan Madol, Micronesia. On the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, the Saudeleur dynasty built a city in the ocean, not on the coast, in the water. 92 artificial islets constructed from interlocking basalt columns stacked without mortar, connected by tidal canals that function as streets. The total stone mass is estimated at over 750,000 tons. The largest individual columns reach roughly 3 meters in length and weigh up to approximately 50 tons. Construction ran from around 1180 AD into the early 1600s. The entire complex covers 83 hectares. Geochemical sourcing by Mark McCoy and J. Stephen Athens matched basalt from the central royal tomb to multiple volcanic formations across Pohnpei, including Soques Rock on the opposite side of the island, meaning columns had to be transported approximately 40 kilometers by sea. Experimental rafting of smaller test loads has been demonstrated. The heaviest columns are at the upper limit of what any tested raft design could carry. Some stones found on the lagoon floor have been interpreted as possible transport losses, cargo that slipped from rafts during crossing, though that explanation is not as firmly established as the geochemical sourcing evidence. The Saudeleur dynasty collapsed in the 1600s. UNESCO inscribed Nan Madol as a World Heritage Site and simultaneously listed it as an endangered site in 2016. Sea level rise and mangrove encroachment are actively damaging it. They built a city in a lagoon using 50-ton basalt columns, transported 40 kilometers across the Pacific. It's now sinking. It was never fully explained while it was above water. Number 6. Sacsayhuamán, Peru. Above Cusco, at 3,700 meters elevation, the Inca built a series of terraced zigzag walls using polygonal limestone blocks fitted to mortarless joints. In places, a sheet of paper won't pass between adjacent stones. The blocks weigh between 100 and 200 tons. The largest on site is estimated at around 360 tons. The stone was quarried approximately 35 kilometers away and transported uphill. Archaeologist Jean-Pierre Protzen demonstrated in the 1980s and 90s that the fitting technique is achievable with hand tools. Hammerstones can shape the andesite. A scribing and coping method can match adjacent surfaces. The mystery is not physical possibility. The mystery is the operational sequence. How do you maneuver a 200-ton block into final position against an already set wall without a crane? In 2024, Denis Ogburn and Alexei Vranich excavated unfinished terrace walls at Sacsayhuamán's Kruzmoko sector, the first direct archaeological evidence of the maneuvering process. Analysis is ongoing. Separately, the 2025 Chincana project reported using ground-penetrating radar and acoustic prospecting to identify what they describe as a tunnel network running at 1 to 2.5 meters depth between Sacsayhuamán and the Coricancha Sun Temple at the heart of Cusco. The reported length is over 1,750 meters, with some assessments suggesting a larger system. The results have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed site report. They figured out how to move it. They figured out how to fit it. If the Chincana project is confirmed in full, Sacsayhuamán may not only be a masterpiece of stonework, it may also sit above one of the most important underground systems in Inca Cusco. Number 5. The Easter Island Moai, Rapa Nui. The story most people know about Easter Island goes: isolated population, obsessive statue building, deforestation, ecological collapse, cautionary tale. Most of that story has been revised. There are 962 moai carved at the Rano Raraku quarry between approximately 1250 and 1500 AD. The largest erected statue, Paro, is 10 meters tall and weighs between 75 and 82 tons. An unfinished figure in the quarry reaches 21 meters. 62 statues were abandoned along ancient transport roads before reaching their platforms. The transport method was debated for decades. In 2025, archaeologists Carl Lipo and Terry Hunt published a paper in the Journal of Archaeological Science presenting the strongest experimental case yet. Using 18 people and ropes attached to a replica statue, they walked it 100 meters in 40 minutes by rocking it side to side. The roadside moai have a 6 to 15 degree forward lean built into their geometry. The ancient roads are 4.5 meters wide with a concave profile that appears engineered to support exactly this kind of rocking motion. The statues walked. On the collapse narrative, a 2024 study in Science Advances mapped Rapa Nui's Manavai, rock garden cultivation systems, and found far less cultivated area than earlier estimates assumed, suggesting the island's population may never have exceeded around 3,000 people. That's nowhere near the 15,000 the catastrophic ecocide narrative requires. A 2024 ancient genome study found no genetic evidence for a major population crash before European arrival. The demographic collapse came after European contact in the 1700s and after the Peruvian slave raids of 1862 and 1863, which removed roughly 1,500 people in a single operation. The statues walked. The collapse came from the outside. We had the whole story backwards, and the evidence for the corrected version keeps getting stronger. Number 4. Karahan Tepe, Turkey. 46 kilometers from Göbekli Tepe, in the same stretch of southeastern Turkish highlands, there is a site most people outside archaeology haven't heard of. Serious excavation began in 2019. What came out of the ground was strange enough to justify the attention. Structure AB is a chamber carved directly from limestone bedrock, roughly 7 meters by 6 meters. It contains 11 roughly 2-meter phallic pillars rising integrally from the floor. In the western wall, a life-sized human head protrudes from the stone, elongated neck, realistic features, watching whatever happened in the room below. In 2023, excavators found the ribbed man, a 2.3-meter sculpture seated in a niche wrapped in its own arms, ribs visible. It is among the oldest realistic depictions of the human body in existence. In 2025, excavators reported uncovering a rectangular building with tiered seating arranged around a central performance area, with a stone bowl and a channel carved into the floor. The lead archaeologist described it as resembling an amphitheater, a tentative comparison that characterizes its layout rather than its function, which remains unknown. Like Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe dates to around 9,400 BC. Its builders were hunter-gatherers, no domesticated animals, no agriculture confirmed at the site. Like Göbekli Tepe, the structures were deliberately sealed and buried. Where Göbekli Tepe focuses on animals in its carvings, Karahan Tepe seems focused on the human body. in close detail, at large scale, in configurations that haven't been convincingly interpreted yet. 11 phallic pillars, a watching stone face, a seated figure wrapped in its own arms, and a tiered performance space, all carved 12,000 years ago by hunter-gatherers, and we still don't know what any of it was for. Number 3. Teotihuacan, Mexico. By 200 AD, Teotihuacan was the largest city in the Western Hemisphere. By 450 AD, it may have housed 200,000 people on a rigid grid covering 20 square kilometers. The Pyramid of the Sun is the third largest pyramid on Earth by volume. The Avenue of the Dead runs 2 kilometers through the center of the city. We don't know who built it, not in the vague sense that ancient history is complicated, in the specific sense that we cannot identify the founding population's language, ethnicity, or the name they used for their own city. The Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico centuries after Teotihuacan's abandonment and named it Teotihuacan, the place where men become gods, because they had no record of what it was actually called. Isotope analysis of residential compounds confirms the city was cosmopolitan. People from Oaxaca, the Gulf Coast, and the Maya lowlands all lived there, but that tells us who arrived, not who founded it. Since 2003, archaeologist Sergio Gomez Chavez has been excavating a tunnel running 700 meters beneath the Feathered Serpent Pyramid. He has found liquid mercury pools, interpreted as symbolic rivers or lakes, pyrite mirrors arranged to create a reflective surface overhead, miniature stone mountains, jade offerings, and sacrifice victims. No royal tomb, the largest pre-Columbian city in the Americas, apparently did not bury its rulers beneath its most important building. In April 2025, a team published confirmation of a Teotihuacan-style painted altar at Tikal in Guatemala, dated to 400 to 450 AD, with talud tablero architecture, a child burial in seated Teotihuacan posture, and murals linking Tikal's new ruler to Teotihuacan authority. This adds to the evidence for direct Teotihuacan political intervention in the Maya lowlands around 378 AD, a period called the Entrada. The largest city in the Western Hemisphere has no royal tomb, no name we know, no founding language we can identify, and was apparently running a political operation 1,000 kilometers from home. The tunnel under the main pyramid is still being excavated. Number 2. Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. In 1994, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating a limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey that local farmers had been avoiding for decades because it was full of carved stones. What he found required revising the timeline of human ambition by roughly 6,000 years. Göbekli Tepe dates to around 9,600 BC. Its T-shaped limestone pillars, carved with foxes, snakes, vultures, scorpions, and abstract symbols, weigh between 10 and 20 tons each and stand in circular enclosures up to 30 meters across. The craftsmanship is meticulous. The engineering required to set the pillars is not trivial. The builders were hunter-gatherers. They had not yet domesticated plants or animals. For a century, the orthodox model of civilization ran: farming first, surplus second, monuments third. Göbekli Tepe was built before step 1. The original interpretation, world's first temple, built for ritual purposes by a proto-religious elite, has been revised since Schmidt's death in 2014. His successors at the German Archaeological Institute, including Lee Clare and Necmi Carul, have documented cisterns, hearths, grinding stones, and domestic rebuilding sequences, suggesting people were living at the site, not just visiting for ceremonies. The ritual interpretation isn't gone. UNESCO still frames the site primarily as a ritual landscape, but it's now layered with evidence of regular occupation. About 5% of the site has been excavated. Magnetometer surveys have identified at least 20 more enclosures beneath the surface. The specific mystery that hasn't been answered: why were the enclosures deliberately buried? After each period of use, the pillars were systematically covered with rubble, and a new set of enclosures was built above them. This is not structural failure or natural accumulation. It's intentional. Something about the cycle of building, using, sealing, and starting again was built into whatever was happening here. 12,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers built the most sophisticated stone complex in the world, used it for a generation, and buried it. Then built another one, then buried that. We're still not sure what the cycle meant. Number 1. The Great Pyramid of Giza, Egypt. The Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest structure on Earth for 3,800 years. It contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. The granite ceiling beams in the King's Chamber weigh between 70 and 80 tons each and were quarried at Aswan, 800 kilometers south, then transported by river and lifted roughly 60 meters into position. The outer limestone casing, most of it stripped away for later construction projects, was finished to a tolerance of 2 centimeters across a 230-meter base. In 2013, a papyrus was found at the Red Sea port of Wadi al-Jarf. Written by an official named Merer, it describes in daily log form the work of ferrying white limestone from the Tura quarries across the Nile to the Giza Plateau. It is the only first-hand written account of pyramid construction ever found. It documents the transport of casing stone. It says nothing about how the interior blocks were lifted. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project published a paper in Nature announcing the Big Void, a space at least 30 meters long with a cross-section comparable to the Grand Gallery, detected above it inside the pyramid's body using 3 independent cosmic ray muon imaging systems from Nagoya University, KEK, and the French Alternative Energies Commission. The void has never been entered. No camera has been inside it. In March 2023, the same team confirmed a 9-meter corridor behind the North Face's chevron blocks, accessed with an endoscope camera. Its purpose is unknown. The competing construction theories, straight external ramp, spiral ramp, Jean-Pierre Houdin's internal spiral based on microgravity anomaly data, have each attracted serious engineering attention. None has been verified. None has been demonstrated at full scale. The Wadi al-Jarf papyri document material transport, but leave the lifting problem unresolved. The reason this site sits at number 1 isn't that it's the most exotic mystery on this list. It's that it's the most studied building in human history, examined continuously since at least the time of Herodotus. And it still contains rooms no human has entered, documented voids with no confirmed purpose, and a construction method that 2,000 years of scrutiny hasn't fully resolved. The Egyptians got better at building pyramids over time. The bent pyramid changes angle halfway up because something was going wrong. They experimented, they adjusted. They were engineers solving a problem, not mystics performing a miracle. That context makes it more impressive, not less. And the fact that we still can't fully reverse engineer it says something specific about what they achieved. 2,000 years of study, the most advanced imaging technology we have, an eyewitness papyrus, and there are still rooms inside it no one has entered, and a construction method no one has demonstrated. That's not mysticism. That's just a very hard problem we haven't solved yet. 20 sites, 5 continents, 12,000 years. None of these mysteries require extraordinary explanations. Every one of them is an active research problem, being worked on right now with the best tools available. And in nearly every case, those tools are making the questions more specific, not making them disappear. The thing that runs through all of it, we keep finding out things are older than we thought, bigger than we thought, and built by societies more organized than the model said they should be. Carnac pushed back by 1,500 years, the Plain of Jars by over 1,000. Göbekli Tepe rewrote the entire timeline of monumental construction by 5 millennia. What that means is that we're still early in understanding what people were doing before the periods we consider historical. The evidence is accumulating. Most of it is still in the ground. Thanks for watching.